Hi everyone, welcome to my video. SCRT Telangana, Class 9 English, Unit 1 Reading A, The Snake and the Mirror. So in this lesson, we come across the experience of a homeopath. He shares it with his friends. They all have gathered together, maybe after a long time, to discuss about their lifestyle situations and so on. At that time, they happened to discuss about snakes. So in that discussion, automatically the topic came snakes, and there a homeopath, a physician, he is asking the question. So the content or the lesson begins with the question: has a snake ever coiled itself around any part of your body? So if you observe here, he speaks about his experience. And in order to make people to understand the severity of that, he asked that question. Has a snake ever coiled itself around any part of your body? And he says, a full-blooded cobra, a very strong, healthy cobra. So usually we see around our house a lot of snakes. But whether it comes inside the house or maybe it coils around any part of our body, that's a different thing. Such experiences people might have not had. We might have heard about snake bites but we might have not experienced such. Here when he asked that, all of them were silent. And what prompted the doctor to ask that question was they were discussing about snakes. And so when he asked that question, all of them were very quiet and just they paid attention to what he was discussing. So he began to discuss or narrate the incident that happened in his life. So here I have shared glossary of the lesson. Okay, so you can better go through it so that you don't have to have the trouble of referring it in the dictionary. So here the homeopath continued with the narration, the experience that he had. In that he says, it was a hot summer night about 10 o'clock. So he mentions about an incident that happened at night. I had my meal at the restaurant and returned to my room. So he was not preparing food and all at home. And very late night he used to return from his work. As he was a homeopath, so he was working maybe in a hospital or clinic or something like that. So there, after completion of his work and all, he had his food and reached home. I heard a noise from above as I opened the door. The sound was a familiar one. So when he opened the door, there was some noise from the roof. Okay. So a familiar sound, which means he used to hear that sound every day. Okay. That was a common thing for him. One could say that rats and I shared the room. So one could say that rats and I shared the room, which means the homeopath and rats, they were all there in that room. For a long time, they have been together. I took out my box of matches and lighted the kerosene lamp on the table. So from this, we must understand there was no electricity. It was not an electrified house. And so there was no electricity in that house. So, from this, what we need to understand the poor condition of the doctor. Maybe he just began his medical practice, and that could be the reason he was staying maybe in a remote area. Okay, he was having his meals and all at a restaurant. He was an unmarried person, and he was not staying with his family and all. Okay, so there was no electricity, and also he stayed in a poor locality. Okay, poor people's locality, we must say. The house was not electrified. It was a small rented room. So it was not a home of his own. It was not a house of his own. It was just a rented room. I had just set up medical practice and then my earnings were meager. So he was not a rich person and he was not a person who was earning a good sum of money. It was meager. Meager means very less, very small in quantity. I had about 60 rupees in my suitcase along with some shirts and dhotis I also possessed one solitary black coat which I was then wearing. So those are his possessions. Very less things. You can't expect too much. He was not that rich person. He had first thing just began his medical practice, and so his earnings was meager. He had only just 60 rupees in his suitcase, a few shirts and dhotis, and with that just one solitary black coat, a single black coat. And so whenever he went, he used to wear that. Whenever he went out in order to show himself as a dignified person, he was wearing it. I took off my black coat, white shirt, and not so white vest and hung them up. So once he reached the room, he just removed his black coat, even white shirt, and not so white vest. This is very important. It's a white vest, but what happened because of using it for a long time, its color has been changed. And so now it is not so white. Okay. He hung them up. I opened the two windows in the room. It was an outer room with one wall facing the open yard. It had a tiled roof with long supporting gables that rested on the beam over the wall. So if you look at the picture, you can understand what is meant by gable, what is meant by tiled roof and all. So it is not, as I told you, a very rich person's house. It was just a rental room. And so he did not have enough money and all, so he could not go for a better house. So he was staying in a small single room, a rental room. And it was not an electrified one. Now, when he opened the windows, he could feel, he thought that he would get some fresh air and all. Okay, because it was an outer room with one wall facing the open yard. And as it is a tiled roof, it has the gable, supporting gable. So if you observe the pictures, you can understand that. You will get a clarity of it. And these beams that rested on the wall. So if you observe, you will be able to find below the left corner, if you see that picture, you will get the clarity. What is meant by gable, how it rests on the wall, about the tile roof and things like that. Okay, fine. There was no ceiling. It was an open one. Directly you could see the roof, okay, without ceiling. There was a regular traffic of rats to and from the beam. So, lot of rats were moving from the beam to the wall on the gables and all. They were moving to and from the beam. I made up my bed and pulled it close to the wall. Okay, so in order to get fresh air, okay, in order to get fresh air, what did he do? He just he moved from there. Like, I made up my bed, it is mentioned. I made up my bed means so he just arranged his bed. Okay, he just arranged his bed and pulled it close to the wall. And pulled it close to the wall means he pushed it, kept close to the wall, because close to the window maybe. I lay down, but I could not sleep. He lay down, he wanted to sleep, but as it was too warm, okay, summer, there was no electricity, so it was too warm inside. Though he kept the windows open, still it was warm, so he could not sleep. I got up and went out to the veranda for a little air, but the wind god seemed to have taken time off. Now, what happened was that he could not lay down, he could not sleep, so he just came out, he remained there in the veranda, but there was no fresh air. And he feels that the wind god had taken time off, which means even wind god also, it is too late, even wind god also might have gone to take rest because there was no fresh air, there was no cool air, and he was unable to sleep in his room. So this is what we see in the first part. Okay, the rest of the lesson, the rest of the content we will see in part 2, 3 and 4. So that's all based on this lesson. Thank you.